Actually, you go over here. Let me get this up. All right, I think we're ready to go.
Well, our sites are not up yet. We are not ready to go yet.
This is where I remembered I had to plug in the HDMI cable. Do you have another joke, or is it just cool beans again?
Well, I used up the cool beans one yesterday, so I don't have any more to tell.
OK, now let's give that a shot.
Oh, it's working. Cool.
There we go.
Well, hello, CascadiaJS. How are you doing? We're so excited to be here.
She's Daphne Liu.
He's Tiger Oaks.
And we're here to talk about how we automated our relationship. A little about us. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft, currently working on Microsoft Loop. And I previously worked on 3 different web browsers. On Twitter, I'm not_woods, as in not that golfer.
I'm a front-end developer working at Lyft. I work on the web app and design systems. I don't know how many Daphnes you met in your life, but on Twitter, I'm the better Daphne.
We've been dating for 6 years, and we just got engaged last year.
Oh. And people ask us how we managed to stay together for so long.
Our answers are communication, transparency, and teamwork, all of which we automated.
Yes, we're exactly what you imagine when 2 software engineers fall in love.
But ever since we moved into each other, chores have been a constant struggle. The constant,
you do it.
No, you do it situation.
So we decided to take the matter into our own hands.
We created software solutions so that we don't have to do our chores.
But don't get us wrong, this talk is not only for couples.
It's for you if you live with roommates, or with your family, or even by yourself.
Hey, you. You do your cooking, right? Yeah. OK. And you manage your schedule? OK. How about you? Do you do your laundry?
No, I hate laundry.
Oh. OK, so these are things that all or most of us have to do.
We want to show you how to build various tools using node.js, APIs, and the Internet of Things to help you set up various routines.
Here's the agenda, folks. We're going to go over our 3 favorite home automation projects: recipes, meeting, and laundry.
We're usually going to talks where we think, wow, cool project. That sounds like work.
But not this one. We're going to go over our implementation, but our code is also available on GitHub, so you can get started without writing any code. Yeah, we're so generous, right?
I know, right?
Do you think everyone came in here today thinking Tiger and Daphne are going to automate my laundry?
No way. I'm so excited. Let's get started. My first home automation project, recipes. Being an adult is hard.
So hard.
I miss in college when I could just eat pizza all the time. Our bodies just don't work the way they used to.
Have you run into a situation where you're hungry, but you're way too hangry to think and cook, and you try to make it work, but you have nothing at home and you don't know what to make? And you finally stock up your fridge, but you forget about them, so they grow moldy. There is no way to win.
No, we're software engineers. We can beat the system.
To keep ourselves accountable, we collected a list of recipes we try and love in Notion, a project management tool.
Ooh, we're so organized.
Yeah. And we follow this template. We have links, we have shopping lists, and we also have the instructions underneath. Whenever we see a recipe we like online, we copy and paste into Notion. This should work, right?
No, this only lasted us about a month. Turns out picking out recipes week after week gets pretty tiring. So we did a retro on our process to figure out what wasn't working for us. Each week, we would spend time picking out 12 recipes around a list of around 70, and then we'd start having to assign them to different days of the week on this chart. And then we'd have to go into each recipe and then get all the ingredients and copy them into our grocery list. Then we have to do that 12 times. Then we have to repeat that every single week. You know what a repeated task sounds like?
Automation!
Yeah. So we created a script to automatically pull from our recipe list in Notion and then randomly assign meals onto days in Trello. Finally, adding ingredients onto our grocery list.
Let's go over a quick demo. So we set up a board just for meal planning, and each week we pull some recipes, we run the script to randomly generate them. So we got 2 recipes per day, lunch and dinner, for Monday to Sunday, and when we're ready to cook, we click on one of these cards to go to the link, and that'll take us to Notion, so we can view the instructions. And then we can also view the shopping list on the leftmost column in the card like that. Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
Hey. Now, why did we decide to choose Notion and Trello? Well, this talk is sponsored by, just kidding, we're not getting paid for this. Actually, this guy right here works on a competing product to Notion called Loop. So if any of you know his manager, this talk never happened.
And use Loop when it's available.
Yeah, but seriously, we like these tools because of their APIs and their UI. For Notion, we like that we can structure our recipes like a database. And with the templates, we can parse the data in a predictable way. For Trello, we like that the UI is very similar to our previous flow, and we can drag and drop so that we can switch our order around whenever we like. And the best thing is, it can work offline, so we can take it on the go to the grocery store. Now, you can use other tools if you like. If you want to use a JSON list to represent your recipe, sure.
I'm sure there's at least one person here who goes, Notion, Trello, I can just build this all myself.
We won't stop you. But we want to avoid reinventing the wheel, so we can just focus on the script. Speaking of the script, we have our recipes and our code available on GitHub, so you have the option to mentally check out for the rest of this section. I'll let you know when to come back.
But if you don't want to end up eating exactly what we eat, stick around for the technical implementation. So let's start off with pulling the recipe list from Notion. Notion provides a developer API, so we're able to fetch an array of pages from a database. We also need to obtain an API key to prove that we have permission to access it. To use the API, we just need to use fetch, passing in a URL from developer documentation, along with whatever body and headers are required by Notion. This gives us a JSON array back of a list of recipe pages. Then we can just shuffle that using any installable NPM module. We don't need to spend any time writing a randomizer algorithm ourselves. But with that recipe array shuffled, we're now ready to move on to assigning meals onto days in Trello. Trello provides its own developer API, so we need to use a second set of documentation and get another set of API keys. But the principles of calling API stay the same. We just need to use fetch with a URL from the developer documentation, along with whatever body and headers are required by Trello. In the UI, we've set up a new Trello board with some blank columns here for each day of the week, along with a grocery list on the left. And in our script, we've just hard-coded that order, always assuming that it's just going to match what we configured in the UI. Now, we start iterating for each of these weekday columns. First, deleting all the cards from last week, and then adding 2 new cards, one for lunch and then one for dinner. We add this add recipe as card helper function to populate the content in a card, pulling the title, cover photo, and a link back to a Notion page. The final result looks something like this.
Ta-da!
We have recipes assigned to each day of the week, and clicking on them allows us to go see the original Notion link so that when we're ready to cook, we can see the ingredients and instructions.
Wow, that sounds all really easy.
Well, it is pretty easy. This is a fairly straightforward sequence. Except for that NPM module we had to install, everything else is just a series of short for loops and simple function calls. And because it's just a small script that we're running once a week, we don't need to worry about databases, and we can just hard code API keys. And newer JavaScript features like import statements and top-level wait also make it much easier to write and organize this code.
Did you know that JavaScript is actually great for writing scripts? Who knew?
Yeah, I think we're all just so used to building these complex, shiny web apps with bundlers and authentication and databases that we're not used to writing simple scripts anymore that don't need any infrastructure.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so let's talk about how to export that grocery list to Trello. Instead of clean computer data, we're now working with human written text.
Written by you.
Yeah. So we need to figure out how to parse the recipe. This is a format we follow. We have a shopping list header, and underneath we have the grocery list, usually in bullet lists or to-do items. In Notion's API, each line is called a block. So the entire page is an array of blocks. So we iterate through this array, looking for a header that matches shopping list. If we don't find it, we're going to return an empty array. Every time we run into a bullet list or a to-do item, we're going to add the list item to our result list. If we run into an empty line or a paragraph, we're going to ignore it. Now, if we run to a different header, this means we're no longer in the shopping list section, so we can terminate the loop and return the result. But sometimes, because I like to make my life extra hard, I do not consistently follow the template. Here's an example of me leaving the ingredient list in this mumbo jumbo. And because of that, we need to do some error handling. And we do that by keeping track of what recipes are throwing an error by printing to the console. And that way, we can come back to tweak the algorithm or to update the recipe manually. And lastly, we want to export the grocery list to Trello. Here are two functions that interact with the Trello API. The top one creates an empty checklist, and the bottom one populates that checklist with the grocery list items, one by one. And that's it.
Nice.
And of course, there are so many features we'd like to build, and we'd love you to contribute to the repo. For example, we want to be smarter about overlapping ingredients. I mean, what would you even do with half a zucchini, right? And we also want to regenerate the grocery list. If this is not a broccoli week, we are not eating broccoli. Having a recipe board has helped us save time, eat healthier, and eat what we enjoy. We hope you give this a try as well. So other talks out there give you code samples, but have you been to a talk that gives you delicious recipes? I rest my case.
Our next home automation project is meetings. We share a home office, and it's the worst when we start accidentally talking over each other because we found out we had a conflicting meeting. So we'll show you how to connect your meeting calendar to smart lights in your home office that will light up when you're inside a call.
And also, if you were tuning out just now, time to come back.
So we have two of those on-air signs hooked up above our desks. And then instead of having to manually turn them on and off, we've connected them to smart plugs so that we can toggle them programmatically. We do this using an HTTP API provided by a program called Home Assistant. Home Assistant is an open source piece of software that works with pretty much any smart home device. It allows you to use an HTTP API to connect to all these devices, just like Notion and Trello. You can also set up on a server in your own house using a Raspberry Pi, a virtual machine on your laptop, or just buying a pre-made server from them. We'll also work with the Google Calendar API, so we can pull our upcoming meeting events. Now, unlike the recipe script, which ran once a week and went through some sequential steps, this script needs to keep running all the time, since we could add calendar events at any point. So we need to write code that will respond to events as they happen. We can do this using Node.js's event emitters and listeners, which will allow us to create code that will respond as events happen. So what event emitters do we need? First, some that emit new events whenever a calendar event begins, highlighted in red. Then an in-between listener that will check certain conditions, and if they match, re-emit the event, highlighted in yellow. Finally, another pair of listeners that will use the event as a signal to talk to the Home Assistant API. Let's dig deeper into this flow. First, we'll start with the calendar emitters. These will go for the upcoming calendar events and emit a new event whenever these calendar events are starting. Then we'll have a filtering listener that will filter out non-meeting events. We have events on our calendar like on call that lasts a whole week, or lunch, which isn't really a meeting anyways. And these events need to be filtered out. But for ones that do match, we'll then re-emit them and start going into two different listeners. One, we'll use this as a signal to immediately talk to the Home Assistant API in order to turn on the lights. Whereas the other will set a timeout. This timeout will correspond with the end of the meeting, and when that finishes, the Home Assistant API will be called again to turn the lights back off. It's a little bit like streams, except you can have multiple inputs and multiple outputs. For example, if we want to work with multiple calendars,
Like personal or work calendars.
we can just add additional inputs into the same flow.
Now, we use a tool called Node.js to make home automation easier to write and visualize. It's built on top of Node.js and abstracts away the most complex part of home automation. It's low-code, drag-and-drop UI, make the event flow easy to understand and therefore avoid bugs. It's free and it integrates with Home Assistant. In the Home Assistant UI, you can go to the add-on store and find Node.js and install it like that. Node.js comes with various built-in nodes. For example, if statements can be created with the UI shown on the left. But for more complex functions like our set timeout, you can write your own custom JavaScript functions like shown on the right. Now let's translate everything we talk about into Node.js UI. I can describe everything that's about to happen. Oh, okay, or I can stall until it comes back. First, we replace, oh no.
I'll just keep going through it.
Okay. First, we replace calendar emitters. Oh, okay, here's back. Okay. We replace calendar emitters with pre-made Home Assistant nodes. And when I say pre-made, throughout the whole talk, it means that somebody out there has written open source code and you can import it as NPM modules. So we set it up so that they emit whenever a calendar event is starting. Then we filter out non-meeting events by asking if this is a busy or a free meeting. And now we branch off into two different nodes. On the top one, which you cannot see, we have it set up so that, here.
Stare at it now, quickly.
Yeah, before it goes away. Okay, it turns the lights on immediately. And this is set up using the pre-made Home Assistant node. And the other one turns the light off, but after a delay. And this is done using the setTimeout JavaScript function. In a nutshell, Home Assistant and Node.js are this power duo that once you learn how to use them, you can apply your skills to other home automation projects. For example, our last topic of the day, laundry.
Yeah, so we're guilty of running and then forgetting about our laundry machine.
Have we thought about setting a timer?
Well, that's boring. So instead, we're going to attach a vibration sensor onto the machine so we know when it's running. And then we'll connect that sensor to a speaker so we get announcements whenever the laundry's done.
Wow. Is that overkill?
No.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No,
This is
not at
great.
all.
Okay, let's go over a quick demo. We start out by loading dirty laundry and pressing start. And now our sensor is going to detect when the vibration is starting. When the vibration stops, we have it send a signal to our Google Home to say,
Washer is done.
okay, it's really
Which quietly
quiet.
says, washer is done.
Yes. Okay.
So just like our meeting system, our laundry system is built on top of Node.js. But now, instead of the nice, consistent, computerized calendar data, we need to work with smart home sensors. Into the world of flaky data and tests.
In terms of unreliability, Selenium got nothing on us.
So since we're budget conscious,
AKA cheap.
we got a $20 Aquara vibration sensor off of Amazon. This listing tells you in all caps that it requires Aquara Hub.
But don't be fooled. It's a marketing scheme to get you to buy from the same company.
In fact, you can just use any kind of Zigbee hub. What is a hub? A hub is a physical device that your smart home devices will wirelessly connect to in order to talk to the internet. Some devices use a protocol called Zigbee, an alternative low-power communication protocol. These devices will connect to the hub and then use that connection in order to reach the internet and other services. It's very similar to how Wi-Fi works, where your smartphone or your laptop will wirelessly connect to the router in order to talk to the internet. Zigbee is just another form of wireless communication. Products from Philips Hue, IKEA Trodfree, and Aquara, they all use Zigbee, but you don't need to buy a hub for every single brand. Instead, you can buy a single universal Zigbee hub, such as this Zigbee USB stick that we have. We've plugged this into our Home Assistant server, which has built-in software support for Zigbee, And all of these devices can now connect to this one hub rather than us having to buy multiple hubs. At home, we set up 2 vibration sensors, one attached to our washer and another attached to the dryer. Then we also paired these with a USB stick so that in the Home Assistant UI, we can see incoming events and data. So once that sensor starts moving
And grooving.
we can start reading these vibration sensor numeric strength values. So once these strength values rise above a certain threshold, we can just assume that the washing machine is running. Once they fall back below, we can assume that the machine has stopped and laundry is done.
But Tiger, how do we determine that threshold?
Pure trial and error, really. We started running experiments at home and recorded the start time and end time whenever we ran the washing machine. And then we also set up these graphs in Home Assistant showing the vibration strength over time. You can see pretty clear spikes whenever the washing machine starts running. From this information, we set a threshold of 24, which captures whenever the machine is running and omits times when it's still. If you're doing this at home, I recommend you try playing around with different thresholds.
Now that you're all experts in Node.js thanks to the meeting section, let's go over how to translate the laundry automation into Node.js UI. First, we start with listening to vibration sensor events. This is done using the pre-made Home Assistant nodes. Then we have some logic to compare the previous and the current event. If the previous event has a strength of above the threshold, aka the washer was running, and the current one has, the current one has a threshold of below 24, aka the washer, I think I'm just not gonna touch anything here. Okay, below the threshold, then we can send a signal to our Google Home so that it can broadcast for us. In our house, everything is plugged into Home Assistant, including our Google Home. So actually, Home Assistant has a built-in functionality for text-to-speech. So we hardcode our Google Home to say,
Blum, washer is done.
pretty good, right? You make a good Google Home. So that it will tell us when our laundry is done.
Using Node-RED like this also makes it pretty easy to make future alterations. If we decide that the threshold is too low or too high, we can just change it in one line of code. And if we decide we want additional notifications, we can just add new nodes into the same flow, like one for sending emails or for tweets.
Tweet? So the whole world knows your laundry is done?
What? It's built in. So that's how we automate our laundry. You can find links here to the Aquarius sensor we use, as well as a Zigbee USB hub on Amazon. And you can also find these, as well as our Node-RED flows on GitHub.
So now you know how we managed to stay together for so long by automating 1,
Recipes.
2,
Lights.
and 3.
Laundry.
But truthfully, there is no way to fully automate any relationship. It's what happened under the hood when we work on these projects together.
We communicate to each other what was and wasn't working in our everyday lives, what our pain points were and what we struggled with.
We were transparent to each other what our lifestyle preferences are. Some people might be okay with others talking during their meetings, but that's not us.
And finally, we worked together on these projects, iterating and customizing on them for months to make them ours. It turned out to be pretty fun bonding time. I highly recommend home automation as a date idea. Well,
And you can also do the same self-reflection with your family, with your roommates, or even yourself.
I hope that this talk has helped kickstart your own IoT journey.
Again, this is Tiger.
And that is Daphne.
We're based in Seattle and would love to talk to you about home automation, web apps, or improv. So if you see us around the conference, feel free to come up and talk to us. See you
Bye.
around.